Hi, my name is Juliana Smith, and today we're going to cover some fundamental social work concepts. The first of which is person and environment. And this training is geared towards community health workers, but I think it's also valuable for anybody who's new to social work or wants an introductory look at the person and environment perspective. So today we're going to cover viewing clients holistically and looking at their full systems. We're going to cover a tool called eco mapping, and we're going to go over person-first language. So for person in environment perspective, it's based on human ecology theory. And this theory states that our behavior and development are influenced and impacted by the systems that we interact with in our environment. And these systems can be things like individuals in our lives that we interact with regularly, and can also be the components that make up who we are as people. These systems can be groups and organizations that we're a part of. These groups that we draw strength from, or that can be obstacles in our life, and the communities that we're involved in. There are also some environmental factors that we'll cover as well. So I think this image is a helpful way to start thinking about the different systems that impact our clients. And if we start in the center with the individual, you can also think about the wide array of characteristics that make up each individual as part of this system. So there are a lot of things that make you who you are as a person, and we'll give you a chance to think about what some of those might be, but a hint for a way to start thinking about that is that my gender is a big component of what makes me who I am and what contributes to how I move throughout the world. So we're talking about those kinds of components when you're thinking about the individual level. But you can see we're also thinking about things like family members, school settings, access to healthcare, and more broadly thinking about the place that you're born. So we can kind of break these things up into three categories. At the individual level, at a broader groups level, and then most broadly looking at the society that the person is in. So I'll give you some time to think about some individual characteristics and individuals in our lives that really make up who we are and really affect our clients' behaviors and choices. So in the individual category, I have things like gender, age, race, socioeconomic status, and citizenship status, and religion as well. So all of those are the components that I was mentioning that are kind of what makes a person who they are, and really will change the way that people are able to move through the world, and it will affect what they have access to as well. And then at the bottom there, you can see there's things like our family, friends, teachers for children that we're working with, even neighbors. So these are, again, the components that really make up a person and can really affect their day-to-day life and the choices that they have. So these are critical components to think about when we're working with our clients, and things to start thinking about to understand their full system. So in the groups category, again, take a minute here to write down what you think would go into the groups category. And here I listed things like clubs or a classroom. So if we're thinking again about children as clients, thinking about the groups that they interact with that really can shape their day-to-day life. So if they're the clubs, what their classroom setting is like, if they have access to sports teams, what their neighborhood situation looks like. And so we're thinking about all of these different things in terms of strengths and obstacles, because we want to find ways that we can connect our clients, but we also want to be mindful of the different challenges that they are facing. Again, schools, we know that access to education is something that varies from person to person, and access to a certain quality of education as well. So we're looking at what type of school this person was able to go to. Public transportation network, that's something that we know affects our clients as well. And then if they're involved in any sort of church, that's something that we would consider too. And of course, there's going to be things on this list that you might have added that I left out, and that's great. So we're really, take as much time and think of as many things as you can that might impact different people. And then let's move to the societal level and take a minute to write down some things at a really broad macro level that affect our clients. So here I listed things like culture and language. If we're thinking about someone who recently moved to the United States, for example, as a client, their experience with our culture and their experience navigating a new language is going to impact all of their day-to-day decisions, right? And then if we're looking at things like laws and policies, remember in the individual category, I listed citizenship status for one. Of course, someone's citizenship status is going to be a big part of their day-to-day life. If they are not a citizen and they're trying to navigate getting a job and just moving through society, it's obviously going to be very different from somebody who is a citizen. So things like laws and policies are really impacting our clients and the government as well. The last two I listed there are prejudices and biases. Thinking from really a cultural standpoint, what some of these biases are and things that are kind of unwritten laws of our culture, right? So I also would put into this category things like racism, sexism, classism. All of these really impact our clients' access to different systems and abilities to move throughout society. So this is giving us a good broad picture of what our clients have access to, what challenges they're facing, and what is going to be influencing their decisions as well. So all of these are really important to keep in mind when we're working with somebody. And when we're thinking about how we can connect them to different resources, what they might be interested in working on, what they would not want to work on, it's all going to be impacted by these things that kind of make up who they are and what systems they're a part of. And it's important to remember that systems can be an obstacle or a strength, and at times they can be both. Using the school example, I think, is really helpful if we're working with children as our clients. We can have two children who are attending the same school, and it can be a vastly different experience for both of them. For one of them, it might be a source of strength. Going to that school, they have a bunch of friends there. They are able to build their confidence and do well in school. And at the same school, there might be another client who going to that school is a great challenge. It's an obstacle. It's very difficult. Maybe they have difficulty making friends, or maybe they have a difficult time learning. The same thing can be said for family systems. We know that in some cases, a family can be a source of great strength. It can be loving and nurturing. And in other cases, a family can be a very damaging system. So just thinking about each of these systems in terms of whether it's a benefit to our client or it's an obstacle is really helpful. And of course, this can change over the lifetime as well. So we're thinking about our clients where they are today, and that can change over time. So I want to work through a case study today, and it is Maria Velasquez. And we'll use this case throughout this training series. Let's say that Maria Velasquez is a resident, and she was referred to community health workers by the food pantry staff because she wants to work on lowering her blood pressure and maintaining a healthier diet. During your first meeting with Maria, you notice a large bruise on her neck, so she begins to share her story with you. So I'm going to minimize my video here so that you can read through her case, and then we're going to work through it together. Okay, so now's a great time to, if you're with a group, to discuss if you're with a partner to discuss, or if you're by yourself, just to work through these questions, maybe take some notes. Thinking about what your initial reactions are to Maria's story and her situation currently, and starting to put together an idea of what we know about her systems. We're going to use Maria's case to work through eco-mapping, which is the tool that I mentioned in the beginning. So to start doing that, I wanted to have you all make a list of these 3 categories for Maria's system. So again, thinking of things in the individual category for her story that are going to impact her on a day-to-day basis. So for Maria, I listed the people in her family, so her husband, of course, her 2 children. I listed Deborah, her coworker that was mentioned. And then I have some question marks here for things that we don't quite know about yet. Like, is she still in contact with her family members? Does she have any past friends that could be a source of strength that she knew from before she met Rodney? Does she have any other coworkers that she's close to? Is she close with her supervisor? And of course, in this individual category are the other sort of components that make Maria who she is, right? So her race, her citizenship status, her language of origin, country of origin, those sorts of things are in this category as well. So at the groups level, take a minute and write down any sort of groups or affiliations that you noticed that Maria might be a part of. And again, we can list things that we're not sure of yet, but that we want to explore. It's a good way to remind yourself what kinds of questions you might want to ask her to get more information. So in the groups category, I listed the Army because that's Rodney's place of work. And we know that she's had some interactions with the Army, asking for help and not being able to receive that from them. I listed her workplace, her children's school, because we know a lot of times parents are involved. So maybe she has interactions there that we might want to explore. The community health workers are a group now that she's interacting with and that can be a source of strength for her. And then I listed things like, does she have any hobbies? And what is her neighborhood like? If she's a resident at Foundation Communities, we might know a little bit about her neighborhood and her situation there, but maybe that's something we want to explore. And then looking at the society categories, what sort of things would you write down or list in that might be impacting Maria? I listed things like language. We know English isn't her first language, and although she learned enough to get through high school, it still might be something that is hindering her ability, maybe filling out paperwork. We're not sure if she's able to write it as well as she can speak it. And again, since she is coming from a different country, American culture might be something that's impacting her, as well as being a part of that military culture. I also listed things like laws, racism, and xenophobia as factors that might be playing into what she has access to, what her day-to-day life is like, and kind of what her overall system looks like of support. So look at your list, and if there's things that you didn't add that I added, or vice versa, make adjustments or add anything else that you thought about while we were going through this. There's definitely other things that you could think of to add to these lists. So now that we kind of have an overview of the things that we would put into Maria's system, we're going to look at an eco map. And the eco map is a great way, it's a tool that you can use to map out Maria's system and get it on paper so that you can see where you might need more information and where you can connect the client to resources, as well as keeping in mind, again, those obstacles and challenges that she has. So this is the eco map that I made. We start by kind of having each factor in its own bubble, and then we're connecting those. And one of the important parts of the eco map is that each relationship is represented by this connection. So as you can see for Rodney, the US Army, and her stepfather, I've connected them to Maria with this red squiggly line. That is a tumultuous or negative relationship that Maria is a part of. I listed her stepfather just to represent her past abuse. Even if they aren't currently in contact, she might still be processing through what her life was like at that time. And so I thought it was important to add it here. And then you can see for her children, Deborah, and the CHWs, I listed those connections as sort of this rainbow connection. And that represents a positive connection, a source of strength for Maria. And then I also included her school, her children's school. And I included that with some dashed connections because I'm not really sure whether that relation is super positive or even that strong of a connection, but it's something that I want to look into. And so an eco map can look pretty different depending on how you want to do it. But the main thing that's important is being able to get it on paper. Some people do this with their clients to help their clients kind of look through what their system looks like and identify sources of strength. Some people use it just as the clinician themselves to kind of look through ways that you can explore areas with the client to identify more strengths and obstacles. So I think now is a great time to choose a client that you've seen in the past or anyone that you know in your life really and create an eco map for that person. If you have someone to share it with, great, you can do so and just explain each connection that you listed and explain why you included what you did in your eco map. Of course, you can use Maria as well. And again, there might be different things that you include in your eco map that I left out. So now we're going to talk about person-first language. Person-first language is referring to the person first and adding in the identity or trait after the fact. So here's an example. Rather than saying that someone is wheelchair bound or saying that they're a cripple, identifying them by their characteristic or trait, we're saying she is a person who uses a wheelchair. So person-first language is all about really identifying the person first in their entirety as an individual and really acknowledging that they are made up of so many components, not just one factor of their identity. This is really, really important in our work, but it's also really, really important in our day-to-day life. Being intentional about our speech and choosing to list the person first rather than just categorizing them based on one portion of their identity can have a huge impact in our relationships with our community and just goes a long way for treating people humanely and treating people as the person-first language ties in really well with what we were talking about with person and environment. Because we really, when we're looking at our clients, we don't want to just think of one aspect of their life, especially if someone's coming to us with a presenting problem, something that they want to work on. We don't want to boil down their entire existence to this one problem or think about one aspect of their life or their system or their identity as their entirety. So person-first language is really important. Here's some common phrases that sometimes that we hear or that we might have used ourselves that are examples of not, these are not person-first language. And I really liked from that video, and feel free to pause and take some time to discuss about that video as well, your reactions to it or experiences that you've had where this has come into play. Maybe where people have used not person-first language or you yourself have. I think it's really especially interesting how she's talking about each person as this full puzzle that's made up of so many different pieces and components. That is exactly what we were talking about with looking at everyone's system in its entirety. So these are some examples of person-first language. So putting the person first by saying that someone is a student with ADHD, an individual with autism, or a person experiencing homelessness. So we're taking the person first, and then we're listing the identity or the characteristic or trait or disorder or current life situation after that, because that is not all that this person is. So we want to really be intentional with our language in that way. So the background behind this is just that people are more than one thing. We're more than one aspect of our personality or of our life. And it can be really damaging to basically label somebody. So I'm reading through these examples right here. So one of which is we want to say that a person uses a wheelchair, not is confined to a wheelchair. So this is emphasizing empowerment rather than limiting a person. The same goes for, a lot of times we hear people say like, oh, she suffers from depression. That's putting a limitation on a person that maybe that's not the way that they experience it. So we would just say a person with depression. And when we're seeing clients, this is important because we want to see them holistically, again, putting them in their entire context and not boiling them down to one aspect of their identity. So take some time to discuss with a group, a partner, or to take some notes down for yourself. Think about some ways that you can use person-first language in your work, but also in your day-to-day life. Thanks for watching this training.